Before we enter the shadows of empire, we begin with revelation. In the Torah, the book of Exodus tells of a Pharaoh who feared the growing numbers of the children of Israel and decreed the death of every newborn Hebrew male. In the Bible, Exodus chapter 1 and 2 recount how a child was hidden for 3 months, then placed in a basket upon the river, only to be drawn out by the daughter of Pharaoh. In the Qur'an, Surah al-Qasas reveals divine intervention. Allah inspired the mother of Musa to place her child in the river with a promise, "We shall return him to you and make him one of the messengers." 3 books, 3 traditions, 1 child born under tyranny. And today we enter that story not as a distant myth, but as a living warning. If you value deep historical storytelling that connects revelation with global power and modern parallels, make sure you subscribe now and stay until the end, because what began in a cradle of fear would shake the greatest empire on earth. The world before the cry. Egypt was not weak. It was not unstable. It was at the height of its terrifying magnificence. During the era known as the New Kingdom of Egypt, Egypt was a superpower without rival in its region. Monumental temples pierced the sky. Obelisks stood like frozen lightning. Armies marched with chariots plated in bronze. Gold flowed from Nubia. Trade routes pulsed across Africa and the Levant. This was not a fragile kingdom. This was a machine. To the north, the rising Hittite Empire was expanding, mastering iron and forging alliances that would soon challenge Egypt's dominance. To the far east, the Shang dynasty flourished in bronze sophistication, oracle bones recording questions to heaven. Civilizations were rising everywhere. Power was centralizing. Empires were calculating. And in the middle of this global consolidation stood Egypt, confident, organized, efficient. But inside that golden empire lived a people in chains. Bani Israel, the people who multiplied. They were not Egyptian. They were not elite. They were descendants of Jacob, known as Israel. They had once entered Egypt during famine, welcomed in the time of Yusuf. But generations passed. Kings changed. Memories faded. The court no longer remembered the favor once shown to Yusuf. And then fear began. The Hebrews were multiplying. Their numbers were rising. Their cohesion was strong. Their identity remained distinct. In the mind of a ruler obsessed with control, that was not cultural diversity. That was a threat. Pharaoh's calculation. The Qur'an does not simply call him king. It calls him Pharaoh, a title soaked in authority. Historians debate which ruler this might have been. Some suggest a monarch of the 18th or 19th dynasty. But scripture focuses not on the name but on the psychology. Pharaoh looked at population charts. He looked at labor distribution. He looked at military risk assessments. And he saw danger. What if they join our enemies? What if they rise during war? What if our own strength becomes the cause of our downfall? Tyranny rarely begins with madness. It begins with insecurity. So he enslaved them more harshly. Brick kilns burned day and night. Whips cracked across backs. Construction intensified. Oppression was systematized. But the numbers did not decline. They increased. And fear turned into brutality. The decree. Then came the command that changed history. Every newborn Hebrew male was to be killed. Not imprisoned. Not exiled. Killed. Midwives were ordered to inspect births. Spies were planted. Infants were hunted. The Nile, symbol of life, would become a silent grave. And here we must pause. Because this was not random cruelty. This was state policy. This was bureaucracy weaponized. This was demographic control enforced through murder. And if we are honest with ourselves, history has seen this before. When regimes fear losing control, they attack the future. They attack children. They attack identity. They attack hope. Pharaoh believed he was protecting Egypt. He did not realize he was preparing its undoing. A mother's terror. In a modest dwelling among the enslaved lived a woman from the tribe of Levi. Her name is preserved in tradition as Yocheved. She had already witnessed horror. She had heard the screams. She had seen soldiers enter homes. She had watched mothers collapse over lifeless infants. And then she felt the signs of pregnancy. Fear did not come gradually. It exploded. Every kick in her womb was both joy and terror. If it was a daughter, the child would live. If it was a son, death would arrive at the door. And here is where divine history narrows into one house. One pregnancy. One cradle. One impossible choice. The birth. The night was quiet. No royal trumpets. No celestial fireworks. Just a fragile cry. It was a boy. A beautiful boy. The Qur'an describes the inspiration placed in his mother's heart. Not a thunderous revelation. Not a public miracle. A whisper. Hide him. Trust me. For 3 months she concealed him. 3 months of silence. 3 months of muffled cries. 3 months of constant dread at every footstep outside. But babies grow. Their lungs strengthen. Their voices carry. And the system of surveillance tightened. She could not hide him any longer. The basket. This is the moment that separates fear from faith. She was inspired with something that defied logic. Build a small chest. Seal it. Place the child inside. And cast it into the river. Imagine the weight of that command. The Nile was vast. Currents unpredictable. Crocodiles real. Soldiers patrolling. To a mother, placing a baby in a river is not protection. It is surrender. Unless you believe the river answers to the one who created it. She prepared the basket carefully. Waterproofed it. Wrapped him. Kissed him. Perhaps whispered prayers through tears. And at dawn, she walked to the Nile. Every step must have felt like walking toward heartbreak. She placed the basket on the water. Released her hands. And history began to move. The river that obeyed. The Nile had carried armies. It had carried trade. It had nourished crops. Now it carried destiny. The current did not swallow him. It did not overturn the basket. It carried him precisely toward the palace of the very man who ordered his death. And here we see the divine irony. Pharaoh tried to prevent a prophecy by killing infants. Yet the child destined to challenge him would be raised under his own roof. Power thought it was in control. It was not. The palace discovery. Servants along the riverbank noticed the unusual object. A basket. Royal guards retrieved it. It was brought to the attention of Pharaoh's household. And then the lid was opened. Inside lay a child. Crying. Alive. Defenseless. At that moment, history could have turned cold. But mercy entered through an unexpected heart. The wife of Pharaoh, known in Islamic tradition as Asiya, saw him. And she felt something stronger than politics. Compassion. She pleaded, "Do not kill him. He may benefit us. Or we may adopt him as a son." Pharaoh, calculating as always, agreed. A Hebrew infant. Inside the palace. Under the protection of the throne. The decree of death had just been pierced. A mother watching from afar. But what of the mother who had let him go? The Qur'an describes her heart nearly breaking. She almost revealed herself. She almost cried out. But Allah strengthened her. And here another thread of destiny moved. The child refused to nurse from any of the palace women. Wet nurse after wet nurse was brought. He rejected them. Cried. Refused. Until his own sister, who had been watching from a distance, stepped forward carefully. "Shall I guide you to a household who can nurse him for you?" The palace agreed. And so the child was returned not as a fugitive but as a royal ward. His mother was paid to nurse her own son, protected by the system that sought his death. And the divine promise was fulfilled. We shall return him to you. Pause here. Let this sink in. Oppression was at its peak. Genocide was state policy. Surveillance was active. Military power was unmatched. And yet a baby survived because a mother trusted revelation over fear. In a world dominated by empires, heaven moved quietly through a river. And this is only the beginning. Because the child who floated in a basket would one day split the sea. But before he confronts tyranny, he must grow inside it. Imagine it a palace of unimaginable grandeur. Walls painted with gold, ceilings adorned with lotus carvings, courtyards bustling with soldiers and servants, fountains gushing clear Nile water. Outside, the city hummed with commerce and the disciplined march of power. Inside, the throne presided over life and death alike. And here, in this machine of empire, lived a Hebrew child, protected by fate, nourished by his own mother, yet surrounded by those whose culture sought his destruction. The paradox of Musa's early life is astonishing. He was both insider and outsider, royal and enslaved, protected and hunted, loved and threatened. He would watch the world of Pharaoh unfold, a world of calculated decisions, cruelty dressed in law, and monumental power. Yet at the same time, his mother taught him the whispers of his own people, stories of ancestors, faith in the one God, courage in the face of oppression. Early lessons in duality. From the palace, Musa observed hierarchies of power. Ministers argued, generals strategized, slaves labored. He saw fear disguised as authority, obedience forced by punishment, and loyalty purchased by comfort. At the same time, he learned humility. He witnessed the suffering of his people, families torn, labor camps, harsh punishments. These twin realities shaped him. He understood both the mechanics of empire and the spirit of resistance. Scripture emphasizes this duality. He was trained in the arts of the elite, yet his heart remained tethered to the oppressed. Knowledge and empathy intertwined. These seeds of leadership were planted early. Bani Israel faith under pressure. Within the Hebrew community, life was precarious. Every household lived in tension, aware of spies, midwives, and the ever-watchful eyes of the state. The culture of fear permeated even the simplest joys, births, celebrations, communal gatherings. Yet, in adversity, faith strengthened. Parents told their children stories of divine guidance. They whispered prayers quietly, teaching that hope can survive even the most tyrannical rule. Musa absorbed this faith. Even as he was carried through gilded corridors, he never forgot the cries of his people. Empathy and courage, patience and wisdom all were forming within the cradle of oppression. Pharaoh's household, a school of power. Inside Pharaoh's palace, Musa learned more than survival. He learned leadership. Observation became instinct. He watched how decisions rippled through society, how punishment could quell rebellion, how mercy could earn loyalty, and how arrogance often led to downfall. He was tutored in reading hieroglyphs, understanding politics, mastering diplomacy. But unlike other children raised in comfort, his lessons had an undercurrent of urgency, the knowledge that the machinery of empire could crush a life in an instant. These early lessons were critical. Musa's upbringing was a rare combination of intimate knowledge of power and personal experience of oppression, a combination that would later make him uniquely capable of confronting Pharaoh. Early signs of divine protection. Even as a young child, signs of divine protection appeared. The Qur'an hints at miraculous resilience. Musa's survival was not only through human intervention but divine orchestration. Every close call, every danger avoided, reinforced the principle that destiny is not fully dictated by worldly power. Consider the metaphor. The Nile carried him to safety. The same Nile that could have taken his life was transformed into a vessel of protection. This pattern continued in subtle ways: guidance that often seemed accidental, protection that seemed coincidental, but which Scripture identifies as providence. The weight of identity. Musa's early years were also defined by questions of identity. Who was he? Hebrew by blood, royal by circumstance, son of a mother who trusted God, or ward of a tyrant who decreed his death? These questions are more than philosophical. They are practical. Identity shaped choices. Identity dictated loyalties. And in a palace filled with intrigue, knowing who you are can be a matter of life or death. Musa internalized these tensions early, learning to navigate dual worlds: the world of power and the world of faith, without losing himself. Early conflicts: understanding injustice. Even as a child, Musa witnessed injustice in small acts: slaves whipped for minor errors, food hoarded for elites, laborers forced to toil in unbearable heat. These experiences were formative. They were not theoretical lessons but lived realities that he felt in his chest, stirring compassion, anger, and resolve. Scripture often emphasizes patience, yet Musa's patience was active learning, observing, understanding the machinery of oppression so that he could one day dismantle it. Parallels across empires. Looking beyond Egypt, the world was witnessing similar dynamics. The Hittite Empire was consolidating power through military expansion, forging alliances, and suppressing dissent. The Shang dynasty thrived with a centralized authority, ritual sacrifices, and strict social hierarchy. Power everywhere relied on fear, control, and loyalty. Yet in every civilization, there were seeds of resistance, faith, and ethical conscience. Musa's story is part of this larger pattern: the eternal struggle between tyranny and justice, power and morality. The silent sister. One figure remains pivotal in these early years: Musa's sister. She observed his placement in the basket, followed its path, and ensured he was reunited with his mother to nurse him. Her courage and quick thinking illustrate that divine plans often unfold through human agency. Small acts, invisible to the powerful, can alter the course of history. This theme repeats across time: an unnoticed action, a courageous whisper, a hidden hand guiding destiny. Lessons for us today. Even thousands of years later, Musa's early life holds warnings and lessons. Tyranny often targets the young. Those who threaten power are preemptively eliminated. Faith and courage survive oppression. Even in dire circumstances, trust in divine guidance preserves life and purpose. Knowledge of power is essential. Understanding the mechanisms of tyranny is necessary to confront it effectively. Small acts have great consequences. The sister's vigilance, the mother's courage, the palace nurse each contributed to divine fulfillment. In modern terms, we see echoes of these dynamics in societies where oppression seeks to silence voices, and yet courage and conscience survive in the smallest gestures. Preparing for confrontation. As Musa grew, he would move from the cradle to a more complex world. Learning diplomacy within Pharaoh's court. Witnessing cruelty and injustice up close. Understanding the vulnerabilities of absolute power. Developing the empathy, wisdom, and strategic thinking that would later define his mission. The child who floated in a basket had now become a youth observing, learning, and preparing, hidden in plain sight, yet guided by providence. As Musa's transitioned from infancy into childhood, the palace became both classroom and cage. The grandeur surrounding him was intoxicating. Vast halls adorned with murals of gods and kings, libraries filled with scrolls, courts bustling with scribes and advisors. Yet beneath this splendor, oppression thrived. He observed the paradox daily. Pharaoh's soldiers commanded unquestioned obedience, slaves toiled endlessly, and punishments were swift and brutal. Musa's early empathy for the enslaved sharpened into moral awareness. Every act of cruelty he witnessed stoked a fire within him, a sense that power misused demanded accountability. At the same time, Musa absorbed knowledge and strategy. Tutors taught him language, diplomacy, mathematics, and the art of negotiation. He learned to read the subtleties of human behavior: fear, pride, greed, and loyalty. By understanding the tools of power, he was quietly preparing for the monumental challenge ahead. Understanding power and injustice. Power is seductive, Musa realized. It creates illusions of control. Pharaoh believed his decrees were absolute, that the might of his empire could crush any threat. Yet, history shows that absolute power is fragile when it is blind to justice. Musa's observations revealed patterns. The oppressed often survived because of courage, intelligence, and divine guidance. The powerful faltered when hubris eclipsed wisdom. This understanding became part of his moral calculus. He would not rely solely on rebellion. He would use insight, patience, and the divine plan to confront tyranny effectively. Early signs of leadership. Even in childhood, Musa displayed qualities that set him apart. He was decisive, compassionate, and observant. He defended other children, negotiated disputes, and questioned authority when injustice was blatant. Scripture hints that leadership is not just inherited or assigned, it is cultivated through experience, reflection, and moral courage. Musa's upbringing, straddling the worlds of oppressor and oppressed, forged this rare blend of strategic wisdom and empathetic leadership. Divine intervention and guidance. Throughout his youth, Musa experienced subtle signs of divine protection and guidance. The Qur'an and Torah highlight how Allah continuously shaped his path. Situations where harm could have befallen him were averted mysteriously. Allies appeared at critical moments. Opportunities arose that allowed him to learn about the world of both kings and commoners. Each event reinforced a lesson. Destiny is intertwined with preparation, and divine timing often operates in ways humans cannot immediately understand. Parallels across time. Musa's formative years resonate beyond Egypt. The Hittite Empire faced internal challenges and external threats, showing that unchecked power is always vulnerable. The Shang dynasty mastered centralized control but relied heavily on ritual and obedience, demonstrating that societal cohesion without justice can be brittle. Musa's story is part of a larger narrative. Those who will transform history are often trained in the shadows of empire, observing both greatness and its moral limits. Preparing for the future. By adolescence, Musa was prepared to take the first steps toward his prophetic mission. He had witnessed cruelty firsthand, developing empathy for the oppressed, gained strategic insight from the palace, understanding how empires function, experienced divine guidance, reinforcing faith and patience, learned to navigate identity, balancing loyalty to God and compassion for his people. Every lesson, every observation, every act of courage or restraint contributed to the shaping of a leader who would one day confront Pharaoh and change history. Key lessons for today. Musa's early life teaches us enduring truths. Faith under oppression sustains hope. Even the most tyrannical environments cannot crush the human spirit guided by divine wisdom. Knowledge of systems is power. Understanding mechanisms of control is crucial for change. Small acts matter. Courage, vigilance, and compassion can redirect destiny. Patience and preparation are vital. Transformation takes time, and resilience is cultivated in adversity. These lessons are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago, reminding us that courage and wisdom often grow in the crucible of challenge. The promise of destiny. The infant in the basket grew into a youth under tyranny, yet untouched by despair. From the Nile to the palace, every moment, every observation, every trial shaped him for his ultimate mission: liberation of his people, challenge of Pharaoh, and fulfillment of divine will. Musa's journey from birth to youth is not merely history, it is a blueprint of courage, preparation, and destiny. It teaches us that even under oppression, faith and intelligence can illuminate a path toward justice. So remember, the story of Musa is more than an ancient tale. It is a living lesson for every age that destiny is forged in the crucible of trials, guided by wisdom, courage, and divine purpose.